Okay, let's talk about Falling Sky. It's a coin game. My relationship with coin games is odd, to say the least. It's a complex thing. Honestly, I really, really love to play them. I respect them in the sense that, like, I believe that they're generally. This one, crap, my battery thing's not acting right. This one may be a little less historically plausible to me for certain reasons. I'll go into that, I hope. I have already, if you watch the playthroughs, and these are always just rehashes of my thoughts, I think. But I generally find them plausible enough simulations, and this one's in that range as well, that I would call them war games. They focus enough on the military situation that I believe that they do still qualify. There are a couple little things. For example, the way the games almost invariably end. They almost always go to the last card, and the decision point is so often made on who gets the first action on the last card of the game. That troubles me, and I have trouble explaining exactly what the problem with that is. It's a sign that it's an incredibly tight game, that people who are playing to prevent other people from winning, unless they can grab the win themselves, are going to be in a position where they push it. If you're close to winning and you get the best of the draws right at the end of the game, the last couple cards, whatever, the last card, then it all seems like it came down to luck. I think what hurts me about that, and I explained this in the intro, is that there's no chance for anyone to run away with the game. You always have enough capability to get yourself back in. It fits a lot of complaints that people have about games, right? There's no runaway leader in this. The game's always tight and close to the end. You don't have a long period where it's like, should I even finish this, or is it just obvious? However, I'm used to games that are not so tightly constructed and that allow you to see where the story is going to go at the end. This doesn't give you that. This gives you a cutoff that seems artificial and just says, game's over now for no particular reason, and we're going to score it here. And that kind of disturbs me. I would prefer to see something that runs its course, I think. That said, those tight design decisions, that intention to make the game so close and to last to the very last card, unless it auto victories, right? Which essentially the very last card is in a different place. But I almost never see auto victories in these. That auto victory situation ends, or that tightness to the last card and people being able to defend and prevent the auto victories and just draw it out to where it becomes a close enough game that it comes down to like a die roll basically every time. The essential, a card flip in this case. Well, that gives them a sameness. It makes them seem a little bit less like they're telling the full story. And it does leave me a little unhappy. We're not talking about this game yet. Wow, what about that? Okay. It did not bother me on the first one. It bothered me on pretty much the third one I was playing. And the second or third, depending on how you look at things. And at that point I started to realize not only did they all have this pattern and this tight design functionality that like prevents you from seeing the whole narrative coming out properly, the whole span, the scope, that grand, epic campaign scope that I love so much in games that I love it. But it doesn't always have to be there. There are other games that I've liked that don't have that. And Here I Stand is actually a good example of something that plays kind of similarly to this. It has a similar kind of tightness where all the players can kind of prevent somebody from grabbing the lead if somebody looks like they're running away with it. Not quite as tight as this, but in the sense that you sometimes cannot prevent someone. There's enough of a lag that time, the amount of time between, hey, somebody's going to win and them actually winning is long enough where you can't do anything about it, that it's kind of problematic. That it doesn't have the same, balance running through the entire game where you're just looking at it and you can always stomp people. Now, I know some people have not had that experience. They may play with people who are less defensively oriented, who maybe take a big shot. I can't imagine that they'd be playing with people who are less capable of reading the board state than I am. I make so many errors that in terms of understanding where things are and what needs to be done, that you would think more of my games would blunder into a victory. But they don't, not in Coin, definitely not. Anyway, for this particular game, a couple of curveballs have been thrown in for that. The most notable one is the Optimates, which allows you to trigger the end of the game early. Do the same rules apply? Yeah, maybe. But they become more complex. There are a few other things, though. It's very hard to move your forces in this game. Except for the Romans, nobody moves quickly. Now, most of the other games, there's some capacity to gain control of the roads or whatever and be able to shift your forces more quickly than the Gauls are able to do regularly here. It may be a functional impossibility or improbability that you're able to do that, but if you really need to, it basically, in order to defend those roads and keep them, from being used by the insurgencies, the government player usually has to put some effort into maintaining the roadworks, and that extra little effort may prevent them from being able to get the victory as easily. So there's, this trade-off. Well, I could set myself up so I could get the victory easily, but then you could stomp in and stop me. In this, the Gallic players have a hard time quickly responding to situations. You're not going to see, for example, I'd see the bell guy close to winning, and it's pretty much only Rome can possibly do anything about this. However, everyone else can make it easier for Rome to possibly do something about this by just letting them go through. So it does still have some capacity to prevent people other than Rome from winning the game. I haven't seen Rome get into a dominant position that no one could catch up with either. In general, this game in my two plays has gone into that let's get to the last card, even with the Optimates card in play, which could conceivably change things. Just because you could, as a player, push the Roman victory far enough that it triggers that card and then be doing better than the Romans. That's an ending that I actually like. It may be a surprise ending, it may come quickly, it may come without much opportunity for that whole story to develop along it, but it's a believable endpoint, right? Okay, some new things come out when I'm thinking just blankly here. So my biggest gripe about this one in particular has to do with the deterministic combat. I struggle with this every time that I play a coin game. I've managed to do a little bit of hand waving to myself and say, you know what? My battery's fucked up. That deterministic system is not a problem in a modern counterinsurgency situation. because, quite honestly, you are very seldom, just did it again, you're very seldomly going to be in a position where you have a big battle between the government and the insurgency player. You're very seldom going to have a situation. I mean, you don't look at Vietnam. You look at Vietnam and you say, okay, there were a couple of elements where there were big actions taking place, but for the most part, those were either across the board, like the great offensives, or fairly limited in number. This fucking thing. It just doesn't sit right in the outlet. And it's getting power, but it somehow doesn't give it to the battery. Okay, well, what does that mean, that, and what am I saying and why? How did I get here? In this particular one, I feel like, and I may be misreading the history to some extent, but I feel like there were more major stand-up tactical battles in the ancient world, and including in the Gallic campaign, that are represented in most of the coin games. Which means more often I'm walking into a situation at a very abstract level, because, I mean, look at the size of the areas on the board. These are not tiny little spaces, like hexes or whatever. I'm walking into a situation where there's a lot of variability about what might happen overall, and then engaging in a massive field battle, not just an overall pacification campaign or something like that, or a series of field battles or whatever, where I should not, no matter what player I am, be able to say with any certainty, I know exactly what's going to come, what the outcome of me moving into that area is going to be. Now, again, I feel like this is something of a weakness in every game in the system, but I've come to grips with it in the more modern situations because it's spread out, right? A counterinsurgency operation going into, Da Nang province and fighting a series of search and destroys and everything, that is not going to massively change in terms of the outcome. There might be some little special events that happen in that, and those are represented just fine by the events on the card. I got no problem with that. With the fact that, an ambush happens that, causes political uproar or something like that. Something like that is fine. The problem here is that what you have is a massive conglomeration of these two forces facing each other, and you don't know, the Romans, every time they march in, feel like they're perfectly secure, fine. It just feels like you have far too much of that knowledge. You shouldn't know whether there's going to be another Teutoburg forest. You shouldn't know, and certainly as the Gauls, that the Romans are positioned exactly in a way that you can assure the losses that you expect. And that really gets to me. I have to say, I'm opposed to non-deterministic combat systems in general. They usually do not feel right to me on the same basis. So if you've come to your peace with the non-determinism, that's probably not an issue for you. So if you play some of the Bowen Simmons games or something like that, you're probably just fine, although there's no hidden element either. Most games that have non-determinism have a hidden element in them. They're like Stratego, you compare the two pieces, this one won. Here, it's more like chess or Go or something. You've got a pile of pieces on the board, you can move. That said, it's a lot of fun to play. I'm not at all disturbed by the thinking and the kind of calculations that you make in the playing. What else? And also, I may see things like the clan centers as being maybe these little circles here that you fight in and you can destroy and whatever, as maybe being less abstracted than maybe they're meant to be in the design as well, because you can wipe those out and you can see in a combat situation that you will A, defeat all the enemy's troops, and B, destroy all of his cities or towns or clan centers or whatever you want to call them. They're different things. There's no towns, but the base coin mechanism, like I've said before, I don't see a problem with that in and of itself. I actually think that the turn generation mechanism could be used in other non-counterinsurgency designs. And it's quite possible that the German expansion to this, the German revolt expansion, is less of a counterinsurgency than this is even. And that makes me even more reluctant to pick that thing up, unless I'm getting it either through a pre-order sale, through the pre-order P500 sale, well, the sale based on P500 issues, or it's contributing to that. And there's a copy down at the store I go to, and I've been kind of fighting with it and thinking I would want to play again. Another thing, though, is with coins in general, I don't want to play another one right away. And my plan had been, I could play this. When I finish this, I'll have that other one, and I'll hit that right away. I don't want to do that. I don't even want to go play Pendragon that I have sitting over there. I need a break from coin. It's not like Britannia. My spirit towards it is similar to Britannia. Like Britannia, I have very little desire to set it up and play it again. It doesn't activate any questions. And some of that may be that incredibly reactive nature. I draw something and I immediately optimize what I'm doing on the board, on the current board state. I don't feel like there's a lot of real strategic decision making in the game, although I have found a little bit more in this than maybe in some of the others for whatever reason. I can't really point to it. I did mention it in the last video, and I remember it coming to mind. One thing with this one, most coins come with a lot of charts. One player aid per player, and then some auxiliary charts to handle the bots and to handle some other specific information. But one thing that I found kind of interesting in this was, usually in the coin games, there's sort of, you grab, there's something you want to do, and that's what you do almost all the time. You're almost always doing, one action each time. I don't know why. It just settles into, and it feels like there's one action or pair of actions or whatever that tends to be the most effective for each given power in a game. And then the other sets kind of become secondary to it. Well, here I actually feel like most of the actions for most of the powers, and the Gauls are very similar, you kind of have to do. Take a look at the Gauls. Rally, that's the way you get your clan allegiances, and that's the way you get more troops. So you're going to want to do that a lot. Counterinsurgency is usually doing stuff like that. March, well, every now and then you have to move in order to position yourself, take over areas and stuff. So that's going to happen a lot. Raid, you need money to do things. That's going to happen a lot. In battle, there may be a couple of factions. There's one faction in particular, the Adui, who probably don't do a whole lot of battle, but everybody else is doing that a fair amount. And then for the special abilities, well, there may be some that you do more than others. Certainly for the Adui, they're all useful. Ambush may be the least of all. I found The Averni Devastate, I could not really figure out a way to use that very effectively. That sort of paralyzes an enemy in an area you control, but not entirely. It makes it more expensive for them to do things, which just doesn't seem all that useful. But maybe I'm missing something. For the Belgai, Enlist allows them to play around with the Germans, which in the games that I've played, usually the Belgai are in trouble if there's a lot of Germans near them. This might be a way to get the Germans off your tail, but beyond that, they don't tend to be terribly effective what you can do with them. They have, limited movement like the Gauls do. Rampage, I thought kind of sucked. Allows you to push people out. It can let you take control of an area so that you can do something like a rally action or something like that. But it seems pretty auxiliary to everything else. However, at the end of the game, this can be incredibly powerful towards the end of the game because you can force someone into a position where they have to take another action. The Roman actions, Siege I tended not to do much, mainly because I didn't feel like I ever needed money with the Romans until the very end of the game in this last one, but in the other games I didn't. Their secondaries maybe a little less build. They don't really need the clan holdings. Forts are very helpful though, so they're of some interest. Besiege I use a lot. Boom, get rid of that annoying fortress, or get rid of a clan, an extra clan that maybe you couldn't wipe out in combat, or wouldn't be able to. Scouting's kind of the expensive, the harder to justify one. It's the least opportunistic one. You kind of have to know, you know what, I don't want to get ambushed. There's a big force here. If I scout a significant portion of it, I can take away their edge for ambushing me. The fact that the game needs a playbook, somewhat annoying. I like the design notes in it, and there's a whole set of examples, which of course I did not read. I don't like doing that, the playthroughs. I find that useless. But then there's a compendium of all the cards. And that's actually important because the cards do not contain all the information that you need on them. There are a fair number of cards where you're going to have to go look them up in the playbook. And that, of course, takes some of the... I don't mind if there's like a sheet with a couple of cards that are special, but when you have to create like, several pages of information covering every card, and it's not all historical, but a lot of it is. But there's a fair number of lookups into it. I feel like the cards have not done as much of a job. They're not as carefully worded, so that the reading of the card itself is unambiguous. Which means, okay, so you have to look it up. And big deal, it's like looking up an event in an event-given game, which using cards with events on them is similar to, right? Yeah. It just feels kind of like a cheap, a pain in the ass that isn't necessary and something that otherwise could be a very quick play game. Overall, this particular one, again, that determinism bothered me a little bit more. I did like the fact, I like the period a lot more in this than I do perhaps with any of the others. This is that I've played yet. The idea, I'm not that big into 20th century stuff, and so most of the coin games which were developed and designed with that 20th century combat conflict in mind didn't grab my interest quite as much. I found maybe because of that, maybe because of a little bit of slower activity in this, maybe because I played it without videoing it once, that I was more, and certainly in that one more than the one that I videoed, that I was more drawn into the narrative of this one, that I felt like there was more of a story. I didn't feel like, I don't know, some of them, I just feel like I'm pushing wooden pieces around. That's not a bad thing in and of itself, but it does give these games more of a Euro-y feel than you kind of want from something, than I kind of want from something that I would say manages to meet those wargaming expectations of a simulation. So far, though, as far as a simulation, I feel like this is the one that's the hardest to justify that I've seen as being one. It's just as much fun to play, though, as all of them. It is similar enough because you're comparing, hey, what does this card do? What are my options there? What's the board state like? Making all those comparisons every time. All those comparisons are kind of a gaming comparison, a set of comparisons, though. By which I mean you are playing a game here that's very obvious. You're not saying, yes, I want to, clear out those Belgai from here. You might be saying, I need to clear out those Belgai because they're close to winning. But you're definitely trying to muck around with the victory conditions and get those points in alignment and everything, and make sure somebody can't just grab a win on their turn, and worried about the ordering on the cards and all this. All kind of stuff that has nothing to do with what the commanders are worried about. Caesar wasn't thinking, I wonder if the events will come up that the Gauls will want to take the event, or if they'll be able to get the jump on me on this next month, I'm not saying that there's not some relationship. I'm just saying the thinking isn't the same, Of course, on an abstracted game, thinking is going to be further and further from the same. You're really not thinking in the same level. Also, the opportunism takes away from trying to develop a broad strategy and then trying to fit the events into that, and only taking advantage of them when either you can't do otherwise, or they fit in with your plan well. Anyway, I don't know if I mentioned this. Sometimes I think I buy these coin games. I have so many damn games I have to play. I feel like I buy the coin games not because I absolutely need another coin game, because again, they do feel similar to me in terms of how I have to play them and everything, and in terms of I'm not getting enough narrative out of any of them, even this one, which I feel is stronger in that aspect. Strangely stronger, even though the deterministic combat makes less sense to me. I do feel like I might be buying them to get a chance to play them again, to get a chance to play a coin game again, because it's really hard to justify replaying anything, even if it's what I want to do. And I've done it actually. I mean, I've pulled out Indian Abyss and played it since, and I've kind of was toying around with playing Fire in the Lake again maybe a year and a half ago or so. And just because I do really get a big kick out of playing these games. I think they're fun. I think they're enjoyable to play. But they're not exactly, they don't give me the same spirit and feeling that I do out of something that has less gaming mechanisms in play. I enjoy playing Tikal too. That is just gaming mechanisms. That doesn't really represent anything with what it's doing. This, I feel closer to Tikal in terms of how I feel about playing it, even though I can directly line things up and see the simulation value that the system and the particular games within the system actually apply. Like I said, it's complicated. All right, let's end this one.